Welcome to the Getting Real with Hilary show, where ordinary heroes tell extraordinary stories during unique and never been heard before conversations with your host, Hilary Arno Burns. Hilary's unique listening and way of asking questions results in conversations that aren't usually talked about, so you can create the life that you really want but are afraid you can't really have. We are demonstrating the greatness in the human spirit and creating a world where we all reclaim our birthright of joy, happiness, purpose, and passion. Now, here's your host, Hilary Arno Burns. Welcome to the Getting Real with Hilary show, and today we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Rita Louise, who can be found at soulhealer.com, and you are going to want to check her out and also check out her latest book. I'll tell you that. So, welcome, Dr. Rita.
Hi, Hilary. Thanks for having me on your show. I am so looking forward to this.
Yes, and I know you used to have your own show and all sorts of stuff. So you're a pro, right?
I am.
So Dr. Rita, that's what I'm going to call you. Just put out a new book. It's her 7th book, and I read it in the last 2 days, all 240 pages of it. And man, do I have a lot of questions. It's called Dang, It Was Me All Along. And it follows her 6th book. Just tell them the name of that because I'll butcher that.
Sure. It's the dysfunctional dance of the empath and narcissist.
Yeah, the dysfunctional dance of the empath and narcissist. So you know what? You got to get that one too. I'm sorry that we all have had a narcissist or two in our lives. But this one is about how you move on from that. And that's why it was so interesting. So anyway, we can talk about Dr. Rita, but I just want to ask you, because I haven't read your other books, are they all like the detail and the, just the work that must have gone into that? How long did it take you to write that one?
So this one probably took the longest, but I was also on my healing journey. And so it wasn't this like crash and burn. Usually my books take me about 9 months to write. I definitely have this birthing process where I start a project and 9 months later, it's done. Let's put that. This one took me longer, but I was allowing spirit to move through me at whatever pace it wanted to go. That was really my point in it.
So. Right. Okay. Because it just, I know if people are watching, they don't know what we're talking about, but basically you had been I'll just paraphrase it. Tell me if I'm wrong. You had been in a relationship with, I think he was a narcissist, and you had gotten out, and now you decided the work was to figure out why and move on, which I know you have. And I think we've all been there. And you quoted, oh God, now I'm blanking on his name, Eckhart Tolle and all the great people. And I'm assuming that you were reading those books as you were healing. Like, how did you gather all that information in one place? And just, the way that you went through it was just so sequential and just so easy to follow. And then we all ended up in a great space. So I loved it. And I recommend it to everybody. If you've ever been stuck in your negative thinking, your rabbit hole, as Dr. Rita says, right?
Mm-hmm. Bad brain. I like that one.
Yeah.
Wait, I have bad brain today.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because in my 3rd book, it's called Your Bullshit is Your Blessing. I talk about the 2 sides of life. And I talk about, the one side where everything sucks and the other side where everything's great. And then I created techniques for getting from one side to the other. So, but you put the science to it, and you really talked about the why, which was so fascinating. And I think, anybody who's ever gotten into a bad thinking trip, I used to call it the octopus, when you have the octopus on you and you pull one arm off and then you pull and you just can't get free of it. Like, you have these great techniques and you tell why, and it's just really so well written. So thank you. Thank you for that piece of work. I think
Well,
everybody should buy it.
so I really like the research, so I was in, I don't care about sharing my personal details. So I was in counseling, and he goes, well, you need to find some fun stuff to do. And he was thinking like crocheting or I don't know. And I'm like, but I like researching. There are things that I really enjoy that are, to the outside person seem like work. But to me, it's like, man, I can just sit there for hours and just be engrossed, especially if I have a question. So when I went into this dang book, so the guy that I dump at the beginning of the book was like not narcissist number one. I talk about that in the dysfunctional dance book of this history of toxic relationships. And I thought I had solved the world's problems by like writing that book. And I was like, okay, I'm going to apply these principles to myself. And it didn't work. And with COVID, my personal practice, I work as a medical intuitive counselor, and energy medicine practitioner. That was failing. And so it wasn't just that the relationship ended. It was my life was felt like it was falling apart. And all I really wanted was to be happy and to experience a sense of inner peace because all I felt was turmoil. And so that was the question that I went into this book with. What do I need to do to find inner peace? And what do I need to do to be happy? And is it something that you can achieve? Because there are people that are just happy people, which wasn't my life, but but there are. And I wasn't even sure if that was something that was possible. And so that was the trek. And when I got that little tidbit of information that says it is something that you can do and achieve, I was all about it. I was all about it. And you
So
mentioned,
what did you
oh,
let like if you were doing your research, like what did you look up? Like what were, you know what I mean? Like what do you where do you even go to do that kind of research? Are you Googling, or do you have libraries or research books? Like how do you do
a
just I'm just
combination of the two, a lot of Googling, looking for specific keywords to kind of get an idea of what the heck I'm talking about.
okay. So
Especially
you
in
just
the
kind of like
sexy part.
so so do you just like follow the trail? Like you'll put something in, they'll recommend this, like a medical researcher almost.
Right.
They mentioned this strand of DNA and then it takes them over here. So it just kind of took you on your path because you had all the greats quoted and you had, but it's also, I mean, you must just have a natural way of organizing data and organizing the flow of the book
Mhm.
because I kept thinking it was done. And then you're like, and another thing. Okay. And it just kept taking us deeper and deeper, which was so interesting.
And I think to me, in all of my books, the flow is just really important. It needs to kind of advance, because in the dang book, there are topics that I talk about, and I'm going to say in the second part of the book that really could have been up front, but I don't think they would have had the meaning. And I don't think
Mhm.
people would have gotten it or be like, oh, this is actually important. Because I talk about all the crap, like this is all the bad stuff going on inside of us, and this is how many of us feel. One of the statistics I found was that 80% of people walk around in negative thinking. That's astronomical. 80%.
Well, I'm amazed that there's 20% that don't.
Well, it's those people that you hate because they're happy.
I know. You want to hear something? I remember I was at a physical therapist once, and she was telling me that, the people come in and they have pain, and, it really gets her down. And I was like, oh, I love those people because it makes me feel better about myself. But anyway, the positive people, they they seem to get down by, I'll call myself a negative person, when we're just kind of venting and getting free of it, that gets them down. So anyway, I thought that was funny that she was blaming us for her problems when she was the positive one.
Hmm. You know, but she
If
might
that
have
makes
been
sense.
very empathic and
Yeah, maybe.
feeling their pain, which is can be challenging. It can be
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, if you absorb it. But anyway, okay. So let's talk about, well, what do you want to talk about? The 80% negative. Do you want to lead people like through it, or you want to cover a couple of interesting things? Like where would you like to go?
Wherever you want to go, you're the boss.
Okay. All right. So when you're talking about well, I had heard, and again, I don't know where I picked it up if it was from yours, but we get addicted to this negative thinking.
Mhm.
Now, in your book, you were saying, let's say I have a negative, let's say my boss calls me in, all of a sudden I'm in trouble. I did something wrong. I start looking at, I go down this negative tube, right? Now, there's also the theory that we get addicted to that we actually get used to it. And I think you covered this too, or maybe that's where
You
I got
cover
it. But
I definitely cover it.
yeah,
And it
yeah.
was to me one of the most hopeful pieces in the book. Okay, so it's possible to be happy. That was like, okay, well, I'm going to explore this because if I can change it or change me, then I'm okay with that. The most hopeful piece, and I'm going to talk a little bit about biochemistry, but I'm going to keep it pretty simple. Because I don't want people's eyes to glaze over. So in our body we have our different cells, and each emotion that we have releases a certain hormone into the body. And on the cells are what are called receptor sites. And the receptor site is like a lock. And the hormone is like a key. And so if we have a lot of stress hormone, cortisol in our body, we have a receptor site that will take that key from the cortisol and make the cell function or not function depending on what the cell is supposed to be doing. So, and the same thing with good emotions, when you feel joyful or elated, it again goes to these receptor sites and makes you feel good or, produces dopamine or whatever. Okay, so that's the basic biochemistry. But this was the mind blowing. I mean, it was really mind blowing to me. So, if we tend to engage in negative thinking or we live with a lot of anxiety or a lot of worry or whatever that is, our body will automatically start producing cells that have more receptor sites for the negative hormones.
Oh,
So it makes it easier for our body to react in that negative way and have a negative experience. Yeah, shocking, shocking. And so, but the good part is that once you start working on and becoming aware of your negative thinking and finding gratitude and saying thank you and doing those good and positive things, when we produce cells, the ones that are keyed for negative thinking hormones start to reduce, and the ones that are tied to the positive thinking hormones start to increase. And so we literally can train our body to think more positive, not think more positively, but enjoy the effects more readily. I mean, because for some people,
so
oh, go ahead.
but let's say, when you were talking about your family, the Kvetchers, so let's say I'm not, I don't know if I'm naturally negative, but I'm negative. I look at things, glass half full. Yeah, we got that sale, but I didn't hit this number. It's all, like I used to say, if I won the Nobel Prize, I would be upset I didn't win it last year.
Mhm.
Like there would be always something that I could see that was bad. Now that's, well,
But you can
so you're,
untrain yourself from doing that. Shocking.
yeah, I think the first step is awareness.
The first
First, you got to be aware.
That is like one of the main things that I drum in into this book is,
Yeah.
most of us go through life on autopilot. Something happens, we have some kind of a reaction to it, both positive and negative, and we just do that. And we just assume, well, this is who I am and this is how I react. But we can sit there and kind of intercept the thought process. They say, oh, well, count to 10 and take a breath. But we can intercept that thought process so that we're not reacting both physically as far as like what's going on in our body or in our behaviors where we're doing things automatically. And it gives us the chance to stop and make a different choice. Now, it might be a nail biting, white knuckle choice, but a different choice.
Okay, so let's say we're aware. We say, oh, okay, I see my negative thinking. I'm assuming he wants to see me because there's a problem, right? I could go, maybe not. Maybe he wants to give me a promotion. Maybe I should be grateful that I have a job. I could switch it to gratitude and thanks
Mhm.
and alter that. Okay, so
But
now,
actually, I'm going to stop you right there for a second.
okay,
So
please
there
do.
is something, and I call it the stories we tell ourselves.
Mhm.
So the fact that you have is your boss just called you in. That's
Right,
the fact. And everything that came after that, well, what does he want? Is he going to fire me? Am I in trouble? Blah, 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 is all the story we tell ourselves that will take us right down the
right,
negative path and create those chemical wasteland of toxic emotions in our bodies.
right. Now let's
And that's the
say,
awareness thing too, just sitting there going, oh, well, wow, that was a pretty good story I just told myself. Maybe I need to not do that and go, what's the fact?
right.
This is
Okay, now,
the fact.
so let's take like I know you were talking about COVID and how you got fearful or whatever, and same with me after 9/11, and I realized that the news, I can't watch it. I can't watch it. If I watch it, I think the world is a terrible place and it's falling apart and we're going to die. So I stopped. And people think that's terrible. How can you not watch the news? But I just find it, for me, it takes me down that negative place. So my mother has a caretaker. I hope she doesn't watch this, but she came over the other day and said that she got me upset. She said that China was going to take over the grid and we weren't going to have any more water, we weren't going to have any more electricity, and we basically we're all going to die. So she was going to go out and get some more water, and I was like, like, what if she's right? Do I need to get what, like, I went down there, and then I
Mhm.
was talking to someone and they're like, okay, all that's so is that she said that, and maybe all that so is that she heard someone say that, and then her church pastor was saying it too. That's what happened.
Mhm.
Is it the truth? I
Well,
don't know.
with what's going on the planet right now, you never know. I just have gotten to where it's like, oh, that's interesting. And there's been so much happening that, I mean, this was a little bit ago, but there's all this crazy going on. And I'm at the gym and they're talking about a volcano in Iceland. And I'm like, oh, and a volcano. And it didn't even faze me, where normally, it would be a little upsetting. But it's like, but in the midst of all of this stuff, but what's going on, I'm going to say geopolitically, who knows? Who knows? And I just am like, oh, that's an interesting move. Hmm, okay. I mean, now, not that I'm like a super prepper person, but I have food in my house. I have a generator. I have those things that, worst case scenario, I'm going to take what you say and kind of go with it a little bit.
Prepare just in
But I
case. Yeah.
don't have, like a underground bunker with 3 years worth of food. It's kind of like,
Water. How about water? I worry about water.
I mean, I have some, you know, but I work
Some
with
jug.
that, so
Yeah. Yeah.
and I
Anyway,
have some bottled water. And because we just had this big freeze and my pipes froze. I filled my bathtub with water, and supposedly there's supposed to be another freeze in February. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to leave that water there because flushing a toilet is really important.
That's right. So what would you say for people who maybe watch the news and think the world is a terrible place? Now, I know I ask a question and then I keep talking, but I mean, I guess it's like if they don't think it's a problem and they think it's true, then there's nothing to talk about. It would only be for the people that say, you know what, this doesn't really make me happy. Let me read her book and see maybe I could live a different way, right?
hmm so for those people, I mean, I go through phases where I won't put the news on, and I won't watch like mainstream media news because I have a lot of issues with what they say. Um, but in the same breath, it's like I want to personally want to have like some level of awareness of, okay, well, maybe this is something I need to consider. Um, But if it's really affecting you and you're running around that the world is coming to an end, then maybe turning the news off. During COVID, because being a health practitioner, I was really paying attention to what was going on and, kind of feeling it out. And because I figured I would be swamped with people, which turned out to not happen, which was kind of shocking to me. Um, but I was encased in so much fear that I had to sit there and go, okay, what's going on with me and what's going on with my world, and these are the facts that I know. You know, I have food to eat. I have water. I have a place to live. I work out of my house, so I'm not really around people. Um, those kind of things. And then, as far as COVID was concerned, I was like, you take vitamins and supplements, you go to and exercise, just about every day. You have other supplements in case you do get sick. I eat pretty good so that even if I got COVID, my belief about myself was that I would not end up in the hospital and I would just be sick and I would be done with it. I mean, I suggested, which got met with some true hate, was that people that got COVID should have like COVID parties, kind of like when we were kids and somebody got chicken
Right.
pox and you went over to the kid's house so you could get chicken pox. I was like,
Yeah.
I was good if I got it and had natural immunity. I was okay with that fact because in my mind, I knew I wasn't going to die. And if I died, I miscalculated, but at that point, it would be too late anyway.
Yes, that's right. Worst case scenario, you die. Wow.
But it took a lot
Okay.
of the fear away.
Yeah.
You know,
So I think it's the facts. Look at the facts and separate that out of the story. Right.
hmm
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So when you said you go down do you call it the black hole? What do you call
rabbit
it?
hole. Rabbit.
Rabbit hole. Yeah. And so you would get stuck, and that was what I call the octopus. What were your favorite techniques for getting out of that?
So originally there weren't any techniques. I would just live there for a week or two at a time. Um, Not a very nice person, you know. Because
You want to give an example?
change it.
Why don't you give an example? Like I know you had some in the book. What's an example of when you went down and couldn't get out?
Well, when I would be in the rabbit hole, I would just have a lot of very negative thinking, especially about whoever the person was about. And I'm an expert ruminator. So a person who ruminates thinks about what happened, something that already happened versus worrying about the future.
Okay.
And I would just like replay scenarios over and over again. It's like, well, I should have done this, and well, I should have done that, or well, blah, blah, blah. But I wouldn't do anything. I would just stay in this place for forever. And then somebody would like crack a joke, and it was like the clouds parted, and I came back to this world. And so, really, what I was thinking about, mm, I know that it was very negative, and I was not in a good place. Um, yeah,
Were you not aware? Like it's just you just were doing it? Do you know what I mean? I mean, I know now you
yeah,
can
I
see it,
get
but
what
at the
you're saying.
time,
But for me, it was something that I had done since I was a little kid. So it was just a very normal, natural, ugly, dark hole that I would get in and stay. And finally I needed to, I came to recognize that I was in a rabbit hole. Not that I really had the tools to change it, but as I started becoming more mindful of myself, and aware of that, I have not been in my rabbit hole in years, which is huge.
so originally it's just the way it was. You didn't say, "Oh, I'm in a rabbit hole." You were just in it, you
I
know.
was just in it. Well,
Like
and I got to the place where I could recognize after the fact that I had been in the rabbit hole.
okay.
That was kind of the first step. It's like, wow, you're back. Oh, okay. And I mean, that was a process, but I didn't
Yeah.
have the awareness of what to do to change it. I mean, I graduated from the Berkeley Psychic Institute, so I know all these energy medicine techniques and grounding techniques and this and that and da da da. And I remember years ago, I was in a bad, I was in my rabbit hole, and I'm talking to one of my girlfriends and that studied under me. And she goes, "Well, maybe you should do this." And I'm like, "Hey, that's a great idea. Where'd you hear that?" She goes, "From you." Because I would get so low. There was a line on a TV show, you get so low that you have to roll your socks down to see. And that was really how I felt. I couldn't get out of my own way. I mean, it was just not good.
And was that like I know you talked about your childhood. Was that just how you learned to cope and then you ended up with these receptors and they just kind of locked you in and there were more and so that's the way it was until you got aware, right?
So,
Would you say? I don't know.
no, no, I hear you. So when I would get really triggered, really emotionally triggered, I'd go to the rabbit hole. I mean, I didn't like live there all the time. It's
Yeah.
it could be crap.
So it was safe.
Hmm?
It was a safe place. It was safe
Hmm.
and you could just be there until you were ready to come out, right?
I guess so. I mean, it wasn't very fun, but yeah. Uh,
But it's what you were used to. Like when I'm negative, whenever
but see, it was beyond
it's
that. It was really there was a big disassociation piece that happened. I mean, it was not pretty at all.
and what does that mean? Like what does that mean?
So there's all this stuff that's going on, and I'm just in my little world, and I mean it. So when we talk about stress response systems, there's fight,
Mhm.
flight, and freeze. And so when you fight, you're going to put up your dukes. When you're in
Yeah.
flight mode, you're going to run away. And when you're freeze mode, it's like you're a deer in the headlights and you just freeze. But one of the byproducts of the freeze response is that people tend to dissociate from what's going on. So you hear stories of women who are sexually assaulted and they really don't have a memory of what
Yeah.
happened. It's because they were in a very dissociated state and where they just don't have the memory. I mean, I have some memory, but not like for details.
But so I mean I'm just wondering, so let's say I mean could you dissociate for a week or two and then how did you do your life or did you just
Well, I
do it
mean,
unconscious?
you were just functional. You could come up to the surface enough to work, but on the
Okay.
inside you'd be like, you know,
So you would be working, like people may or may not know that you're doing it inside. So it's
correct,
really happening inside. Okay.
correct,
Okay.
correct. Unless you
Wow.
sit there and talk to me, I mean,
And then you might
And
go, huh?
well, it might be like, you want something and I just like jump your case about it because
Oh,
it wasn't pretty. It wasn't,
yeah.
thankfully, it wasn't every day, and it would have to be a pretty big trigger to set that off. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, you know, again, thank you for being genuine and letting us know, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who do it who don't even know.
mhm.
And this book can really give them some options and awareness. I think, for me, and again, in my book, the first step was awareness. The second step for me was acceptance, because when I thought I shouldn't be that way, that was more fuel for the negative fodder. Well, you're supposed to be positive and you're not, so look what an idiot you are.
Mhm.
It made it worse until I could just go, hey, sometimes I'm in a bad mood. Sometimes
Mhm.
I'm moody. Sometimes I look at and just like, hey, that's part of me. And that's my gift
Mhm.
to the world, because I can make jokes about it. So I guess did you have to accept it, or were you just fine with the awareness stuff?
So I had to really shift gears. I mean, I joke around that so the house that I live in literally has a library, a study with bookshelves. And these shelves are filled with like not fiction, that's for sure. And, there's a ton of books, self-help books, because I have spent most of my life trying to fix myself, between the
Mm,
negative thinking and the toxic relationships and, my own inner critic and
mhm,
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when I started researching this book, I decided that I needed to put all of that down and just put it all in the back burner, because all of that material kept doing was reinforcing the fact that there was something wrong with me.
yes.
And I'm like, okay, well, that's really not working for me,
It's not
but
helpful.
So maybe I don't need to fix something that's broken. Maybe I just need to do something different.
Yeah.
And I have to
Yeah.
tell you, people that are listening, this might sound hard and it might sound challenging. And I have found, kind of working through this process, the freaking easiest thing I've ever done. The biggest part has been being consistent about it. And
Mm,
someone likened it to dieting.
mm,
Dieting in general is not hard. You just have to do it. And becoming mindful is not hard. You just have to do it.
mm,
Now, sometimes you might see a behavior or a thought or whatever that you need to make a different choice about. And that can be kind of challenging. One story I share in the book.
you know what? Can save that story.
Okay,
I'm just going to write it down. Let's go to the commercial break real quick. And then we'll come back. And
perfect.
do you want me to write down what the story is so we don't forget?
I wrote it down.
Okay, good. All right. We'll be right back with a word from word from our sponsor.
Has social emotional learning become just one more thing on your teachers' plates? Do teachers and students both find it boring and ineffective? Then bring Kikori to your school. Kikori transforms classrooms through experiential SEL activities that help students play, reflect, connect, and grow. Even better, students say it's more fun than recess. Schedule a no-obligation conversation at kikoriapp.com/bringkikori. KIKORI.
Do you ever feel like you can't say what you really want to say? Or that you're stuck or in a holding pattern in your relationships, career, personal life, or finances? Are there things you want in life that you've given up on? Are you resigned that this is as good as it's going to get? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then Hilary Burns, host of the Getting Real with Hilary show, has the solution you need. Hilary is a published author of 3 books and has a program called the Getting Real process. This process frees you from what is holding you back, allowing you to create a life you love. Don't believe it? It is hard to believe that it could work, isn't it? The proof is that hundreds of Hilary's clients have used the Getting Real process and are now free to create whatever they want in relationships, career, finances, enjoying life, or just loving themselves more. So go to realtalkwithhilary.com and order Hilary's book, Real Talk, and set up a conversation.
Okay, welcome back to the Getting Real with Hilary show, and thank you as always to our sponsor, Kokori. If you want to bring experiential, experiential social emotional learning to your schools or business, please contact Kokori. And also, if you find yourself not able to speak up and you have areas where you feel stuck, contact me, Hilary at gettingrealwithhilary.com, and let's get you free. And now we're going to hear the story from Dr. Rita Louise. Welcome back.
Story.
All right. Thank you. Yes.
Um,
Just got the story.
okay. So, I mean, this was like a million years ago, and I'll just start in the beginning. So, I was 19. I had escaped from living in New York with $125 and my stuff. And my parents were waiting for the call, like, I need bus fare to come back, which never happened. And one of the things there were 2 things that I didn't like. One was I was kind of heavy, so I wanted to lose weight. And the other thing was this overwhelming fear of talking.
Mm.
Well, like people that know me now, they're like, what? You were shy? And it's like, oh my God, like beyond shy. And so I gave myself a goal, and so the goal was, and this sounds so freaking lame, but it was the goal. So I used to walk to work because I didn't have a car. And it was, like maybe a half a mile away. So on the way, I would pass a convenience store and I would stop and get a soda and continue on to work. So the challenge was that I would go into the store and say hi to the person behind the counter before they said hi to me. And I remember standing outside the door of the store and like taking a few deep breaths and kind of like sucking it in and going in and went and said, hi, and then went about my business. And I was like almost having a panic attack just in doing that. And so sometimes you see something that you're doing, a thought that you have, a behavior that you don't like, and that has been the hardest part in incorporating something different. Because like I said, people that know me, they're like, you're shy. You were shy. It's like, you can talk fine. It's like, yeah, it rears its ugly head periodically, depending on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but it's taken a long time to work through that, to work through my own fears of that.
Mm.
So the mindfulness part is like super easy.
So what was your fear of saying hi? Do you know what it was?
So I had some core beliefs that included I don't matter.
Mm.
That was a big one. That was a huge, or it was reframed for me. I don't matter. I don't matter to you. And so why would you care what I had to say if I don't matter?
Mm. Wow. So if you said hi, the fear was she would ignore you, or did it not go past that?
I don't
You
know.
just
I was
couldn't do it.
19. I just was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to like I want to have friends. And the whole thing kind of came to light. So I had a roommate prior to this move, And we were talking, and she said, well, I didn't know if you were just really if you were really stuck up or if you were really shy, because I just didn't talk. I mean, I really had to know you in order to have a conversation. And so I think that was sitting in the back of my mind of, wow, this is how people perceive me. Either I'm like really stuck up. I don't know that they would see the shy part.
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, but I'm not.
Interesting, right?
I'm not.
Yeah. No, I know other people, they're terrified to speak, and the more they think about speaking, the worse the harder it gets, The more you, right? If you just do it, then it's out. So you get something out. But the more you think about it, it's like going off the high dive,
Mhm.
The longer you stand there, the harder it gets, right?
But then the more you do it and the more you expose yourself to the new behavior, and it has a positive outcome, because a lot of time there is no negative retribution tied to it,
Right,
then it
right.
becomes easier to do it and easier to do it and easier to do it. So I moved to California, and I was in a industrial design program. That's what I was studying. And one of the criteria was you would like design this thing and then have to do a presentation to the class with like boards and pictures and all this stuff. And it scared the crap out of me. I mean, I already don't talk, and now you're making me go stand in front of a room full of people to give a presentation. And this one friend of mine said, pick one person in the room and talk to that person. And don't look at anything else. Just talk to that one person. So thankfully, he sat in the back of the room, kind of in the center, and I just
Mm.
gave him my presentation.
Did he like it?
Well, I didn't really care. It came out of my mouth, and I didn't stutter and stammer, and because I just kind of blocked everybody else out. And I do presentations in front of large groups of people, and I will find faces throughout the crowd that those are my go-to people, and I still try to do the same thing.
Wow. Amazing. So how did you morph from, I don't know if you morphed, but from taking these actions and getting through this, and then I love the spirit part of the book where you start talking about that. How did you move from into that, or did you just put it in the part of the book there so people could kind of grow into it?
So my background is in, spirituality, metaphysics. I mean, I work as a psychic,
Right.
and
Okay.
I have other books that uh, address that. One of the lines in there, because I'm talking about the chakras, the energy centers in the body, and about being in the flow of the universe and this and this. And one of the lines says, I could write a whole book on this. And I'm like, oh, wait, I already did. It's called Avoiding the Cosmic 2x4. So the concepts I presented were not foreign concepts, but they needed to be packaged in a different way, because I really wasn't interested in explaining, the fundamental logistics of how our energy works, but you need to have some kind of understanding. I mean, my biggest takeaway, once I figured out I could fix things and I started having evidence, was the goal is to be in alignment. The goal is to be in the flow, so, and we've all had those moments. We've had those times where we've gone for a hike in the woods and we just feel connected and we feel good, or we're doing a project, or we're playing an instrument. We're in that flow. And when we're in the flow, we can't have negative thinking. It's impossible. It's just impossible, because once negative thinking starts creeping in, the flow, the movement of energy, the movement of water through your system starts to diminish. And so that to me was kind of the bottom line. It's like, if I feel me starting to diminish, now I know I'm in some kind of negative thinking. Or if I'm having negative thinking, now I know that my energy is being diminished.
Hmm.
And so to me, the goal is all about staying in that alignment and keeping that flow happening. And if you're in situations that are affecting that flow, then maybe you need to take a look at it and make a different choice. Like maybe you're hanging around people who are constantly complaining or are nasty or are not appreciative of who you are. And every time you interact with them, you start feeling bad and you start questioning yourself. It's like, well, do I need to constantly be in a situation where I am being diminished? My happiness is being diminished. And once you ask that question, it's like, okay, well, then I guess I need to decide if I want to keep doing this or not, which can be a
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah. I mean, when you first started making that choice, you know, as a people pleaser, I don't know if that's what you were, but it was kind of like, I can't say no. Like, I can't just leave. What will they think of me? And then I was listening to this thing on dark feminine energy. Did I tell you about that?
Hmm.
And it says you can be the villain and you can have people not like you. It's okay. It's like, oh, like the world won't end. It felt that way. But I think like as you can question, like you're saying, you can question, is this really good for me? Am I questioning myself? Yes. But that was normal for me. That was my rabbit hole, was like, what did I do wrong? Blah, 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 blah,
Hmm.
blah. And now it's like, oh, that's a flag. When I'm doing that, like you said, that's a flag to say, is this really good for me?
Hmm.
Right? Is that the question?
And
Is this,
putting yourself in the same esteem that you put the other person in. Because if you're willing to sit there and walk around and feel bad in order for them to feel good, who are you valuing more? Just saying.
no, I know, but it's true. Well, there was one person where I would say, okay, I could either make you happy or make me happy. And they would say, make yourself happy. And I would say, okay, no.
How do I do
And but that was the only way I could say it. Let's see. And normally, and before that, I would have just made them happy and resented it and been pissed off because I didn't have the wherewithal to say no
that? Hmm. Oh, I'm
because
feeling
I wasn't
well.
even aware.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But
All
it's
right.
about
So
that
good.
awareness. You're walking around. So again, communication, big issue for me. Still again rears its ugly head. Um, have something going on. All right, I'll just share this. Have a new boyfriend. He's great. I mean, he's just really freaking great on a lot of levels. Total people pleaser. But I'll tell you what, I would rather deal with a people pleaser and people please back than deal with a jerk.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I'm going to say every so often, it's been twice. Okay, so every so often, it's been twice. He'll make some crack, and it'll kind of hurt my feelings. And then I'll like ruminate about it for a couple days. And, but now it's like, okay, he made this crack. Your feelings are kind of hurt. You are ruminating. You are ruminating. And what is the solution for me to get out of that ruminating? It's for me to say something,
Mm, me too.
and it's kind of like, I have to say something. But when I say something, it's not like a negative outcome with him, thank
Mhm.
God. So I'm getting that practice of like having a safe place to land while practicing kind of a new skill for me.
Mm. You know what I've done? I don't know if it's helpful to you, but I'll say like, okay, when you said this, I made up that, you don't like me or you think I'm fat or whatever the thing is. And they like then they'll go like, no, that's what I meant. That's not what I meant. Like it's never been what I thought. And that's an easy way to say it because it doesn't put them on the defensive.
Hmm.
And I get to admit that crazy's going on. And then after that, I'm like, oh, okay. And I can let it go. Anyway, I don't know if that's helpful, but
Hmm.
I stopped blaming them and, I just said, this is what I got. Is this true? And they would be like, I mean, never has what I've been ruminating or whatever you call it about been the case. So anyway, in case that's helpful for someone. All right, I have one more question before we we do the wrap up. When you were saying listening to the, like when you were when the sync wasn't working and you heard, you somehow were led to listen to the radio and then go to the store and get that stuff. It's like, how do you know? And I know it's hard versus head and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, what if you don't want to do it? What if it's this? What if you, and I know you did explain it in the book, but can you just explain the difference
Sure.
between what you want to hear and what you don't? Yeah.
So people are really good at not listening to themselves. And so I give this very lame example. You get up in the morning and you get this thought like, I should take a sweater with me, or I should take an umbrella, or whatever, whatever. And you go to work and you get caught in a rainstorm, or you go to work and you go to a meeting and they have it at 65 degrees, which is like subarctic to me. And you sit there and you think to yourself, wow, I should have like listened to myself this morning and taken that sweater. And we all do it. But the awareness part is in recognizing you had the prompting that said, hey, take that sweater. And it doesn't really matter whether you took the sweater or not. It's the awareness that you got the prompting, and the net result was you needed that sweater. So after a while you start getting good at, and part of it is, is just listening and going, okay, well, this is kind of weird and I don't know where this is coming from, but I'm just going to honor it and have that
Hmm.
be the answer.
And how do you know that it's not coming from the fear part of you? Like
Ooh,
that's,
ooh.
like it's like, take a sweater, it might be a hurricane, or take a sweater. Like, is it the voice? Is it, what
It's
makes you
the
calm
voice.
versus fear?
So my experience, and I can only talk from like inside my body, is
Yeah.
that when it's spirit, your higher self, God, whatever word you want to put there,
Hmm.
is communicating with you, it usually comes in a word, maybe a very short phrase. I'm real visual, so I share this story about my dishwasher and having to empty the water out of it, and I'm like, well, God, what can I use? And I get this image, I'm very visual, an image of the turkey baster, and it was like, well, actually that would work. um, and so depending on how people receive information will be how they're going to get it.
But you asked the question, so that might have helped. You said,
And the
God, how,
question
yeah,
does help.
yeah.
But sometimes you just get weird stuff. If it's the
Hmm.
ego, it will sit there and hound you, and it will try to justify what
Okay.
it wants. It's more than just like, here's a little kind suggestion, and then move on.
Okay. All right, good. That's a good difference. All right. So, how, I know we've covered a lot and you have so many books, and your website is soulhealer.com, right? So people can go there and find all of your books, and obviously you're prolific, you're intelligent, you love to do research, and she's done it for you. So you can just get her books and get it all, it's all there. You don't have to do it yourself. What would you like to leave people with? Like, what do you want for the world, for people, in 5 years? What's your vision?
I never know because they don't tell me. They just are like, here's
Come
our plans,
on.
and I'm like, okay. Um, but ideally, I think the message I want to leave people with is that change is possible. And to bring in the concepts that I talk about in the Dang It Was Me All Along book are really not hard. And I feel like if everybody on the planet utilized these tools or became more aware, then there is the possibility that we could live in a bit more of a kumbaya situation, and maybe have the news not be just so fear based. And I call it fear porn, because it's just overwhelming. Oh, it's going to rain, but it's going to be like all this stuff, and the world's coming to an end because there's a rainstorm coming. It's like it doesn't have to be like that, and it's just not real. And so I think if people start tapping in and saying, I don't want to receive that energy from you, then maybe people will stop watching those newscasts, and they'll change because nobody's watching them anymore. Because they're not interested in receiving that anymore.
Wow. And as you said that, I just felt this calm, like, right? Like, take a breath. Be here now, right? It's like you could think the world is ending, but really we're just sitting here talking to each other.
That's right.
Nothing else is actually happening, right? So yeah, the mind can take us to some interesting places. But anyway, all right. Anything you want to say in closing? This has been really great. Thank you so much for your work.
Thanks so much for having me. I think just lastly, I do offer private sessions with people that want some help working through this change process and understanding where they're stuck and what they can do to untangle themselves. And you can find that at soulhealer.com too.
All right. Well, thank you so much for, who you are, what you do for the world, your message, leading us to a land of kumbaya. It's awesome. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Hilary. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you for watching this episode. I started getting real with Hilary when I discovered that I was a people-pleasing, pleasant phony and wanted to be more of my real self. We can grow together if you will like the show, subscribe to my channel, and share this episode with your friends and family so that we can have a world that's more real.